Willie Mutunga, and all the other speakers who have already started requesting for the mics and the listeners. And we really hope for a productive, conversation. And so, without saying much, because I'm really my main role here is to coordinate and to co-host, I will give back the mic to the host, and then we can proceed. Back to you, Hilary.
Thank you so much, Marge Kingston. Oh, Kingsman. Good evening, buddy. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening, Hillary, and good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Mutunga, Tony Gashoka. I can see you here. Nice to have you guys. Great brains from the past, and still instilling and pumping knowledge to the new generation that is now trying to take over. Maybe just Hillary to add on the list of the names that you read. We forgot to read Denzel Omondi Onyango, who was discovered in a quarry somewhere, I think in Juja, where his body had been dumped. He's an engineering student at JKUAT, age 23. He was also murdered because I think there are footage of his that were shared when among the people who entered parliament. So we are losing lives for so flimsy excuses, for people who are cowards, for people who think power must be held on by all will, by fire, by force, which is not right. And I think without further ado, we can welcome our guest speakers, and then we can go.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Miguna Miguna, thank you so much, Dr. for finding time. And you can welcome CJ, Dr. Mutunga. I know she is already a speaker.
Good evening, everyone, and good afternoon for people talking from different time zones. And welcome the speakers and everybody else. Um, the host can admit Buka Omole as a speaker because I believe that he was supposed to be among the speakers. And any other Gen Zs who want to speak and millennials request to be on the speakers list. I hope that we are going to have a good conversation today, especially in view of what happened yesterday. We should be very focused and disciplined in executing this agenda, the revolution, because as you have seen today, the tyrant has once again just thumbed his nose on Kenyans and said he's going to go on until 2027. He's acting as if nothing is happening and is unilaterally constituting fake committees and task forces as Kenyans suffer, as Kenyans mourn, as Kenyans gnash their teeth at the hard economic times. So, welcome everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. for that. And we appreciate your presence always on this conversation. Buka, if you're here, I can see Comrade when you're here. Let me know so that we can bring you on board. And anybody who want on the mic, please request a mic because this is a conversation that all of us are getting involved. Dr. Willie Mutunga, long time. I see you just say hi to the people that want to listening. I want to listen to our conversation this evening.
Thanks, Hilary, and everybody who is on this space. Um, I look forward to listening to the speakers, and when asked, I'll just make a few remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank Thank you so much. Thank you so much, CJ. We appreciate your presence and we are so humble in this platform this evening. Thank you so much, guys. Again, as we start our dialogue, we saw what was happening yesterday. We saw the president was going out there with other leaders, and they were saying that. And now the best way to go is the dialogue and to make sure that so that we can have peace and we're going to rotate our conversation on that one and as you see our topic today, our theme today is just no dialogue, no retreat, no surrender. What do you think? How do you want us to tackle this? How do you want us to move this? All those people as the speakers going to do that. So, Marjan and Kingston, Kingsman, I want to give you a mic so that you can lead on this conversation. And today, if you're given a mic, 2 minutes is okay because we have speakers. We're gonna give them more time to give insights and also Gen Zs because we're going to do it maybe at most 3 hours. That will be good conversation, and we have way forward after the conversation. Margie and Kingsman.
Marge, you go first or I go first?
Just go fast because I would directly go to the speakers. I don't have much to say. If you have something to say, then do,
Okay.
and then I'll go.
Mine was just mine on what happened yesterday, Daktari, and you can see this is the oligarchs who are trying to self-preserve. It's about self-preservation. You see the problems that Kenya has been having for the last 35, 34 years. Yesterday, all of them were in the same podium. They were on the same frame. They took a picture together. For me, that was a perfect moment for us, the millennials and the Gen Zs the Gen Zs to see that our problem as a country, for once, have met and are taking up. They have benefited from the conflicts that have been happening in Kenya, the difference that are brought about by ethnicity, conflicts that are brought about by elitism, and over and over, the likes of Baba, who we know will shake hand with anyone when an opportune time comes for him to reap Kenyans. He was present, someone we've supported so much, but when a time comes when at a critical juncture when the nation needs to take that hard decision, he always goes for the softer path. He was there with Akina Kalonzo, people we've seen since we were born and we found them politicking. So yesterday, for me, was we saw people who are shaken, they are afraid, and it was a moment whereby they had to put their differences together and come together for self-preservation. Nothing to do with the common mwananchi. It's about self-preservation, and that is why you see they are talking about forming a government of national unity, whereby the Gen Zs, the millennials, the people who have been on the forefront of this fight won't be on the table. They are forming up a commission of 150 people to talk about what? The president knows what ails this country. He knows that we are paying a debt of 7.6 trillion that was never really used to develop the country. He knows the corrupt people in his government. He knows he has an incompetent cabinet. He knows that most of the ministries, most of the parastatals are not working. He knows we are paying power over the roof. Myself, I pay a bill of 40,000 every month, even sometimes 50,000 on power only. What kind of a country is that? He knows. So basically, he knows what is ailing the country, but he can't move because he's part of the problem. If you take him back to 2013, when all these debts were being taken, he was part of the Uhuru Ruto ticket. If it comes to the current regime, he is also part of the regime. So I'm wondering what really he's forming this task force to talk about. These are the same people whom you see who are passing silently without us knowing the conflict resolution, the introduction of the conflict of interest bill, whereby now they are allowing themselves to start doing business with government without it being a thing, without it being an issue. So you can imagine if it is so hard for us as a generation now to penetrate into government procurement or getting tenders with government, however hard you try. So imagine where by now where they'll pass a bill where they'll be doing business directly with government. So we are at a doomsday. There's nothing that we've won. I think the fight has just started. So I feel so sad for this country, and I think that it should be the mood in the house for everyone. So yes, back to Hillary.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kingsman. So we head straight away to the speakers. So I see that Tony's hand is up. Tony, kindly. Oh, Hillary, you want to say something? Okay, Hillary, go, and then we can proceed to Tony.
No, let Tony go in. Let Tony go, Marge. Paul.
Okay. Tony, over to you.
Asante sana. I want to start by giving some context. I first met Honorable Raila Odinga in the 90s when I was chief executive of Finance Magazine with Honorable Jehoga Tabaki. Gitobwi Manyara was running the Nairobi Law Monthly, as Dr. Willie Mutunga will remember. And Pius Nyamora was running Society Magazine. And sometime in the mid-90s, Kenneth Matiba bought The People and put Didan Bogua there and David Makali. In those days, when we were interacting with Raila Odinga, he was really a lead in voice in the second liberation and the no reform, no election cry and cause of that era. Now, the reason I'm raising this issue of where these things started and why I think I need to raise my voice, because some of the things Dr. Miguna Miguna has been saying over the years have not had a corroboratory voice, and they are very important. I did not participate in the last general election by choice because other than the BBI marriage that was crafted by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, there was nothing that was being offered in that election that could be able to liberate the people of Kenya. And yet I could not support William Ruto, so I decided to stay quiet. But when the election results were announced and Mandamano began in Kenya, there was a call that maybe they can redeem themselves, Azimio la Umoja. So I flew from Diani to Nairobi, and I met a group on the first day of Mandamano that Raila Odinga had convened in Riverside Drive. And when I got there, I found several people. I found James Orengo, I found Amolo Otiende, Senator Ladama, Ruth Odinga, Wajakoya, Professor Makau Mutua, and I will remember if I've forgotten who else was present. And the moderator of that session was Professor Makau Mutua, kind of asking, we have begun this Mandamano and why? So several speakers spoke about why the Mandamano was an option, why we are going back to the streets, and at that time, the danger of people losing their lives. And why I have come out at this time is because of what Raila said in my presence. He stood up and said that he had wanted William Ruto to govern and give him a chance to see what kind of president he would be. But when he saw that he has bought MPs, he has bought political parties, he is cutting the democratic gains of the 90s, this man is following the architecture of Kaguta Yoweri Museveni and of the president of Rwanda, and that it will become a problem to contain him in the future. And that is why he has decided as Raila to come out in Maandamano, and he will risk his life and doesn't care if he lives or dies, but will not allow Ruto to go for anywhere anymore with taking away the gains of the democratic evolution of the 2010 constitution. And I took him at his word. Now, obviously, if you fast forward a bit, we then heard of certain talks going on behind the scenes. The Nigerian former President Obasanjo in Mombasa, in Ali Hassan Joho's house, and I don't know where. And eventually the whole issue of the African Union and all those things came up. And that was a way of removing the issues that were important that were to be captured in NATCO, which means that the killing of democracy means there is no opposition to hold the president to account. Why? You buy MPs, you buy political parties, you use money and power and influence. And in fact, Azimio la Umoja had the majority of MPs. But this man bulldozed his way unconstitutionally, bought parliament, and forced a majority government. That is when Ruto became a thug. The moment he took over the National Assembly by force, and then I decided at that point, we are dealing here with a monster. And since that time, he has taken the opposition for a ride, and a ride, and a ride again. He called them to NATCO. There was no intention whatsoever to implement anything of the NATCO, including the IBC. But thank God for these children of this nation of Jai Z, because of their struggle, because of the deaths of the people we have today honored by remembering their names. This dictator has begun to implement just one part of the IBC reforms. And I know Dr. Miguna will agree with me that this is even itself dangerous, because who is going to appoint that panel? Who will they be? Will they be now people they sit down, Odinga and Ruto, and they decide who to appoint? And then from there, they appoint another puppet commission or electoral commission, and this country goes from worse to worse. The reason I'm speaking out, and I will continue to do so from this day forward, is because you are completely right. We are at war for our nation. There is nobody that can tell me that Kenyatta and Odinga were not part of the problem. And I say that because I was present when we were doing an audit of the election laws. And it was agreed that maandamano is being done not for anyone to gain, but for the emancipation of the Kenyan people. But for Baba, all it took for him was to be offered the African Union job, and he betrayed all the people of Kenya because he never believed anybody else could fill the streets. In fact, I remember when people used to fight Dr. Miguna from Nyanza, they used to say Miguna cannot fill the stadium. Miguna has no army, he has no military. They never said anything about his ideas or what he was saying was true or untrue. But what has now happened is an awakening across regions, tribe, across all gender, and people of Kenya have said no and have come out. And they are forcing certain things to happen. The second thing I want to raise is the issue of the military. You know, the law that directs Parliament to consider the deployment of military is contained in Section 241. Now, 241 has two sections. Section 3B allows the Minister for Defense, without a motion of Parliament, just notifying to bring out the military in cases of disaster and emergencies. But Section 3C allows Parliament to have a motion to bring the deployment of the military and then specify what they're supposed to do. Now, what happened with the military being brought down on the streets of Nairobi was illegal because they never had a motion tabled in Parliament. Nothing was declared what the military presence and deployment meant. And without going too long into the legalese about it, Dr. William Mutunga can clarify the two elements that are necessary for a legal deployment were not done because no motion was tabled in Parliament that was passed, even as the High Court described. So today, as we speak, in technical legal terms, Kenya is a military state. The military state because the KDF are deployed, whether they are hidden in the barracks or not. What is this that Ruto is anticipating? What is this that Duale is anticipating that they want to leave the military deployed? Is this because, as Raila Odinga told me, that this is a student of Yoweri Museveni who governs through the military? So I cannot put anything past this president because a man who can see 20, 12-year-old children being shot 7, 10 bullets, 70, you're talking about 41 people dead, and not even a government minister attending any funeral. Why do you think this man, if things go south, they cannot bring in the military? As we speak today, I saw Kenyans in Muranga take over a police station because they did not believe that the murderer who was alleged to have committed a crime would be taken for justice. So they raided the police station and they killed him, just as we speak. So my question is, and to the people that are doing the demonstrations, including all of us, we have to keep asking the question, why is there a legal military deployment in Kenya? And in fact, who has to benefit from it? And what chaos is there in Kenya that requires that? Or is somebody going to manufacture a problem like they did when they went to Githurai the other day? And they created a problem. Are they going to sponsor some kind of terrible issue and call it a problem? The other third and final issue I want to raise is the issue on corruption. I am looking at what happened the other day to the former governor of Migori, who was charged with crimes of up to 1.9 billion. And somewhere, the executive and others are negotiating with him to go scot-free, catch some property of 200 million. Who knows what will happen to the other charges? You remember the MP for Cilicia, John Waluke, was jailed for stealing nearly 1 billion with National Cereal Produce Board. He was jailed and convicted for 67 years. He was serving a jail term, and the alternative was he had to pay back at least 1 billion that was lost by the government, and that is the only way in which he would otherwise be released. Today, as we speak, John Waluke ran for elections, convicted, he ran for elections. Nobody ever talks about him anymore. He's a friend of William Ruto. He's a central part of what's going on in Western Kenya and Western Kenyan politics. How can there be any nation on earth where a convicted and jailed member of parliament stealing from the public has been let loose to live and let live? We go to the deputy president, Gashagwa, 200 and something million. Justice Minor of the High Court, before elections, had found Gashagwa a case to answer, over 200 million. We can go back to the Dubai plane hired by William Ruto, to Runturi at the Ministry of Agriculture, to the opulence of Mukomen and Oscar Sudi. And you can look at all these things and ask yourself, all this money is the motivation for which these people are in power. Finally, I want to say this. If we had not defeated the BBI, the only reason the BBI was defeated is because of Chapter 4 on the Bill of Rights. That people have a right to be consulted on how their constitution can be altered and by who. It must be people driven. This time round, the Jay-Z and all of us who are here to discuss these issues are seeing a people-driven revolution for a better government, because there is no valid contract between the governed and the government. And we have a inherent right to break that contract. So mine today is to add my voice that there is no talks, there is no negotiating. And I can tell you Raila Odinga lies to my face, and I'm telling the country as Tony Gashoka that he lied to me. And he lied to me why Ruto should not govern. And yet he's the same man now calling for other talks. And he's the same man who knows NADCO was never implemented. And he's calling for another NADCO simply because he's been told by the president, this is conditional upon our deals going on, whether it's the African Union and everything else, but all other Kenyans be damned. I think that is my opening comment.
Thank you so much, Tony. And I hear some echo. Hillary or Kingsman, I don't know. Hillary, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well. I think oh yeah, that's everything
Okay.
is okay now.
Okay, thank you.
It was Tony's mic, but I've been able to mute it.
Okay,
Continue.
thanks. So, Tony, thank you for your submission. You bring out very important points. If I can just summarize the 4 points that you bring out is, the IBC that they're now reconstituting. There has been also a lot of people who are sharing your sentiments and are wondering if people need change, and that the same people that want to reconstitute the IEBC, is it going to serve the purpose it is meant to serve? That's the question I hear out there. Another question I hear is when you mention about the arrangement of who should lead and who should not lead in the the political elites, and that is exactly what was seen yesterday when all of a sudden all of them were seen on camera pulling together, and the feedback I got was they're now against the 1 inch. Now that we are sharing our problems, they're coming together, and so that really reflects what you're talking about. And the third point is the military deployment. This we will need a legal clarification, but very good to go because we have legal brains in the space today. And corruption is something that we have spoken about over and over, and actually it's the root cause of where we are. It starts. That is where, if we could really just drain the swamp, probably would have a chance. So you really bring very important points. Let's give the mic to the next speakers. We're going to just add on those points as they share. Dr. Miguna, kindly guide if you want to speak first, or if I should put Dr. Mutunga first. Either is fine with me. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, Maj, I believe Dr. Mutunga said that that he would speak when he wants to. I'm not sure that he wants to speak now. If he does, by all means, everyone is free to speak when they want to speak. I could add my voice if Dr. Mutunga does not want to speak now. And everybody else, you are free to contribute. This is a free platform. This is not BBI where the train left and nobody could get onto the train. Um, we are having a discussion, a robust discussion. So, Dr. Mtunga, if you're not prepared to speak now, I could go on.
I'll come in after you, General.
Okay, thank you. I thank Tony for giving that historical background. I think it is very important for us to always ground ourselves uh, on firm foundations of history. It was ironical that the same Ruto stated a few months ago, or maybe a year ago, that history is useless. He said some studies or some programs or courses or disciplines at the university level are useless, and history was one of them. The reason being is that dictators, tyrants, are very comfortable when they're presiding over countries where people don't remember their past, where people don't know what has happened before, the tragedies that have happened before, the errors that have been made before, the atrocities that have been committed before, the plunder that have happened before, so that they can judge the present. Without that historical context, you would not be able to judge the present. Number two, without a firm foundation and grasp of history, you would not be able to know who is deceiving you, who is duplicitous among you, who is always betraying the people. Raila Odinga, as Tony has said, has betrayed Kenyans since 1982. He betrayed Ochuka Okumu and all the people that participated in 1982 coup attempt against Moi, against the autocratic government of Moi. And everyone else that was with him was hanged. He was the only one who survived. The same thing happened in 2018 after I swore him in. They targeted me, they abducted me, they tortured me, they sedated me, they transported. And Raila Odinga betrayed all the young people that died during the NRM protests and revolution of 2018. And there were a lot of people who died, and made a deal with Uhuru Kenyatta at night and turned up at Arambe House, quote unquote, having a handshake and saying that he was putting the country first, said that he was going to make sure that there was justice for those who had been killed and maimed and tortured, but then just failed his tummy and forgot about everybody else. Up to now, he did not attend any of the funerals of the young people that died in 2018, 2017, 2018. Raila Odinga has not mourned Chris Msando, who was murdered to prevent the elections of 2017 being credible and transparent. Raila Odinga never visited my home, never saw the destruction, never actually lifted a finger when I was being brutalized, and only came to the airport on the second attempt of me trying to come back to Kenya to pretend that he was showing some kind of solidarity, or he was in solidarity with me. But in fact, the people who are hearing his telephone calls as he sat there were telling me that he was talking with Matiang'i and the rest to keep me out of Kenya. This traitor has betrayed many, many, many people. It's all about his stomach. So when I saw him with the PS for Interior Omolo in Zanzibar and then in Angola, I knew something was up. Because the question I asked myself, when did PS Omolo become PS for Foreign Affairs to be taking Raila around East Africa to campaign for his candidatures for AUC? Why was Raila doing this in the midst of people mourning the dead who had been brutalized by Ruto? Why was he doing this when bodies, not all bodies, had been recovered? When people who had been tortured were still, some of them, still in hospitals? When Ruto had not expressed any empathy and sympathy and had not condoled with families of those who had lost loved ones? Why was he doing this when Ruto had not even acknowledged that the deaths had been by police bullets? He blamed criminals, quote unquote, and he purported that the protesters were criminals and alleged that the protesters went to parliament and approached the armory in parliament to take weapons. The question is, until Ruto mentioned the armory, I didn't even know there was an armory in parliament. And if I did not know, and many of the people that I spoke with did not know, how the hell did he think that the Gen Zs who were just born the other day were aware that there was an armory in parliament and that they wanted to seize the weapons? Was any of the protesters caught with any weapon? The answer is no. Did they arrest anybody? And they have actually arrested and abducted a lot of people. Whom have they charged with breaking into the armory? Can anybody actually break into an armory barehanded? Who was guarding the armory? How many weapons went missing? He has not tabled this kind of information before us, but he's blaming the protesters. He said the protesters are the ones who shot at each other. So now he's saying the Gen Zs and the millennials who were protesting peacefully took guns from parliament and shot at each other. We had a sniper that was stationed at parliament buildings and who was purportedly hired by the speaker or maybe even Ruto himself, who killed many people. Has he been arrested? Was he actually a protester? The answer is no. We have evidence of a police officer who shot randomly wearing plain clothes and shot randomly into the crowd and killed people. And his name has been circulated. People know where he was stationed. Has he been arrested? No. We have other officers, including retired ones, who are currently seconded to the government in civilian, holding AK-47s, shooting at the crowds. Have these people been arraigned in court? No. Then we have many bodies, including Denzel Omondi, whose body was floating in a quarry after being abducted by the police. Have any of these people been apprehended and charged in court? No. So we know for a fact that Ruto is responsible for issuing the orders of shoot to kill against peaceful and armed protesters. Does he need a dialogue to deal with that issue? Does Ruto need to dialogue with anyone to deal with extrajudicial killings and reckless use of firearm against unarmed civilians? Of course not. Does Ruto need a commission or a committee or a task force to, to fire his corrupt ministers? No. Does Ruto need a task force to dissolve his government? No. Does Ruto need a task force to deal with impunity? No. Did Ruto need a task force to reconstitute the IEBC? No. So why did he wait this long? In any event, he has not reconstituted it. And we know for a fact that given the uprising of the Gen Zs, Ruto is mortally wounded. Ruto knows that in 2027, if we were to reach there, and I would suggest we don't, he would be toast. Kenyans would not be voting for him. So what is he trying to do? He's trying to choreograph a vessel, a vehicle, an outfit that can deliver a, a presidency on a silver platter. As Tony correctly stated, he has completely bought the National Assembly. So there are no checks and balances coming from the institution that is supposed to keep him under check. He has threatened and bought a significant portion of the judiciary. So the rule of law is a myth, a fictitious wish by many people. Ruto knows that the only check now he has are the young people on the streets. And he would like to cripple the young people by bringing PR stunts, choreographing task forces, illegal ones, and committees. And of course, the conman and his associates are always ready to assist them. Now, I have heard many people speak, including Ruto, and they talk about violence. We know for a fact that Kenyans that have been protesting have not been violent. We know that for a fact. We know that for a fact because the first 2 days of protest were very peaceful, with the exception of the police shooting and butchering people. We know for a fact that the demand initially was because of overtaxation and because of Finance Bill 2024. But as a result of Ruto's unbridled, atrocious response, the people have had no reason not to demand more. And right now, the demand on the street is that Ruto must go. So Ruto comes back and tells us he cannot go because he was elected and that his term is 5 years. But Ruto forgets that there is history in front of him that contradicts him. As I have said many times, Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya vests the power on Kenyans to recall Ruto at any time and take back the power they donated to him as their representative and exercise it directly themselves. And there are precedents. And I'm going to go through the precedents so that we disabuse them of this notion that people cannot do this. And the precedents are not just in Kenya, they're all over the world. The first popular revolution in the world was in 1789, May 5th, 1789, in France. And that revolution took 5 years. It started on May 5th, 1789, and it lasted up to November 9th, 1799. So these people who are saying if the Gen Zs were not able to effect their revolution the first few days, then it is lost, they cannot succeed, are wrong. Because even the French did not do theirs in one day. They did not execute the French Revolution in 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month. It took 5 years to effect. Now, there are many that have taken a shorter period of time. And I'm only going to go through popular revolutions, not military ones, because that's what they want to suggest, that anybody who wants to remove them is looking to inflict violence or to use arms in order to remove him, that it is undemocratic and it is unconstitutional. The French Revolution was done by people on the street, and there was no use of weapon. Closer home, the Sudanese protests against al-Bashir dictatorship in December 2018 to April 11, 2019, 4 months, were also peaceful and did not involve the use of weapons. But al-Bashir, who was 1,000 times stronger than Ruto and had been in power for 30 years and was a military man, was removed from power. And he was removed peacefully, without violence. Yes, people would say later on the military got involved and caused chaos. But those chaos were not caused by the people. And it is not always true that the mistakes that are made in other countries will be repeated in another country. Now, let's go to Burkina Faso, also an African country, which happened, the protest happened between October 21st to October 31st and removed Blair Compaore. This one took 10 days. Again, a dictator who had been in power for more than 30 years was removed by people on the streets. Let's go to the Philippines, 1986, February 22nd to February 25th, 3 days protest against Ferdinand Marcos, peacefully removed a dictator, a tyrant, without any gun being used. Let's go to Sri Lanka. Just the other day, March 2022 to July 2022, 4 months, they removed their tyrannical, their main tyrant, and he had to fled the country. Let's go to Romania in 1989. A dictator called Nicolae Ceausescu, again, was removed by police, by public peaceful protests. In other words, what am I saying? What I'm saying is that Kenyans must learn that we have historical precedents where a president that has become rogue, that does not respect the rule of law, that has abrogated the constitution, that subverts the rule of law, that has tried now to castrate all institutional mechanisms of accountability, can only be brought to account through protests, peaceful, huge protests. There is no reason to dialogue with this man because he has already demonstrated that he's not interested in having a discussion. If he was interested, he would have not unilaterally constituted a committee to have a discussion with thugs and conmen and purported to have power to appoint 152 people to have a discussion, a monologue with him, a meeting that he chairs as the main culprit that has inflicted harm on Kenyans. He wants to chair this team. Also, he would not have unilaterally abrogated the rule of law and then decided that he constitutes a task force to audit debts that were acquired illegally, and then appoints one of the creditors, a representative of the IMF, to chair that team. Even after the people have told him, you are wrong, this is illegal, and the courts have also issued orders, interim orders, telling him that he cannot continue, he was still making an assertion yesterday and today that those teams will continue to work. So Ruto is incorrigible, is irredeemable, is rogue, cannot be reformed, cannot change, and must be removed from power. So I will end there and say that my suggestion, in a nutshell, is that because of historical context, I believe Kenyans should be holding these demonstrations daily. And I believe Kenyans should be chasing after senators, MPs, cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, senior bureaucrats, so that they cannot even go to their offices. We must make the country ungovernable wherever we are, so as to make this government fall, so that we can go for fresh elections. That is not calling for chaos. That's calling for order, because chaos is the second name of this regime. I will end it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harry, for your contribution. And so I have two questions for you. First, I have a comment when talking about how people have been killed. There's an incident that actually occurred where, the name and the number of the policemen who murdered Kenyans was circulating online. And there's a Kenyan who called and asked him why he was killing the people. And he's on record, he was recorded saying, I'm sorry I did not shoot you too. So this shows, the level of confidence some of these people have while killing Kenyans. The policeman, nothing has happened to these policemen, and I think I posted about it in the morning and tagged also IPOA. I would like to request everybody else who's in the space and can help to really try to find a way that at least people who are working in the forces, or what has happened until now, just some justice can be received for the victims, because it cannot be that the police were supposed to protect, even unethically, after killing somebody, go ahead and say to the citizen who's complaining that the only regret they have is why they didn't shoot. The question I have for you, Dr. Miguna, before I move to Dr. Mutunga, talking about the task forces, under normal circumstances, it is the opposition that should try to stop the ruling party. Do you believe that if the opposition was working in Kenya, they would be able to stop, or do you think they would still be outnumbered with the numbers that the current ruling party have? Just 1 minute, and then I give the mic to Dr. Mutunga.
Oh, thank you, Madge, and thank you for that anecdote. If the opposition was working as an opposition, by this time they would have brought a motion of impeachment. But you see, they're not even talking about impeachment. If the opposition was working as an opposition, they would have joined the Gen Zs and the millennials on the streets demonstrating against Ruto. But they have not done that. If the opposition was working as an opposition, they would have opposed Ruto publicly, consistently, and throughout, very loudly, telling him that he had no power to deploy the military on the streets, that that was illegal, that he had no power to form the task forces, and they would never have joined Ruto in calling for dialogue. But as you can see, the so-called consultation was between Ruto and Raila Odinga only. Even Kalonzo Musyoka is complaining that he was not involved in the discussions. So we do not have a body, an animal we can call the opposition. What we have in Kenya is an animal we cannot describe. It's not an opposition. And these so-called leaders are not leaders. These are organized mafia, organized cartel. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised today in the morning. Somebody sent me a clip of a former spokesman of Moi who called them just that. So imagine if the former spokesperson of Moi, the dictator that terrorized us for 24 years, can look at this man and say, they are all the same. These are all cartels. They belong to one club, and even after they retire, they will continue to loot public resources because they have passed laws that guarantees that they keep stealing. So what do we need? We need a reset. We need to transform our political, legal, and cultural infrastructure so that we remove from the system this continuous culture of impunity and exploitation. So no, the short answer is no, we don't have a normal opposition. And if we did, yes, they would have brought this government to account.
Thank you so much. So my assumption is that the current opposition in the country is the population and the Gen Zs plus every other citizen that's protesting out there. Okay, so now, Dr. Did you want to say something before I go to Dr.
I
Mutunga?
wanted to agree with you.
Oh,
The Gen Zs right now and the millennials on the street is the opposition.
thank you. Dr. CJ Mutunga, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that what happened yesterday, is a great thing, because in this country there's been a narrative that I've always myself found opportunistic and historical. The narrative that the two factions, that the two ruling class factions, within them, there is one that is a lesser evil. There are people, academics, politicians and others who basically advance this narrative whenever there are elections. That of the two factions, let's choose the lesser evil. And I think it's unacceptable, because if who chooses between evil? It's nobody chooses, between evil. And what happened yesterday is what we have been saying all along, that these two factions and their political parties are basically birds of the same political feather. Okay, and they come together when their class is is challenged, and that's what has happened. So I hope going forward, this narrative that sees the various factions, and these factions are grounded on monetization and ethnicity. That's how they organize politics, and they also share these values. Well, they are not values, evils of corruption, stealing resources, wasting resources, and we're talking about a dictatorship that is going to be 61 years old in December. Okay. And I think you remember there was a time when Moi said that, well, Kanu will rule you for 100 years. They have already ruled us for 61. The people who you saw meeting yesterday, they are all orphans, of the Kanu dictatorship. There's not a single one of them, that can claim that they are not part of that 61-year-old, dictatorship. So, Hillary was right when he talked. I don't know whether it's Hillary or somebody else. I guess it was Kingston, when he talks of self-preservation and survival. Okay, those are great words about classes. That they come together for self-preservation and survival. Uh, so that's important to know. And the other thing that made me very, very happy was the demand by the Gen Z that they were going to occupy World Bank and IMF. Because in terms of politics, you have to connect the foreign interest with the people who rule us, okay? And analyze very, very clearly why our leaders, or these two factions, are enslaved by foreign interests, and why they take, orders from foreign interests, and they've never participated in any public participation. Okay, look at the case of Haiti. Okay, we were not consulted. Look at the case of Palestine. We were not consulted. When the courts say that police officers can't be deployed in Haiti, it's unconstitutional. That particular court order is disobeyed. And in my books, if you are going to talk about the rule of law, then any government that subverts the rule of law is illegitimate. So it's very, very, very important that, as Miguna says, as a people demonstrate, as mass action goes on, it's very, very, very important to make that connection, because that connection is important. In my view. So the other thing, and this is now talking to the well, before I do that, let me talk about task forces, and I give some history. I'm not going to give it the way Miguna has brilliantly given it in terms of dates and so forth, because I haven't done that work. And thanks Miguna for articulating these popular revolutions and uprisings. So when it comes to task force in this country, there's a history of destructing, movements through the formation of task forces. Okay, and I'll give you examples of a few. When J.M. Kariuki was killed, March 2nd, I think that's when his body was discovered, 1975. The system very quickly set up a parliamentary commission that was headed by somebody called Mwangale, Elijah Mwangale, who was, I think, MP for where Mukiza Kitui was MP. I don't know what that constituency is called. And it's what that parliamentary commission did was to really diffuse the tensions, diffuse the tensions, because people were very angry about JM's murder. The universities took to the streets, and so to diffuse, that particular popular unrest, this commission was quickly formed. When it's reported, nothing was done. Even the parliament tried to change some of the findings, and nothing was done. Then in 91, I think, after the ethnic clashes in Rift Valley, there was a Kiumi commission. A lot of time taken there. People having this hope that there was going to be a solution. Those involved were going to be prosecuted and jailed. Nothing happened. Okay, Ouko, Robert Ouko was killed, I believe, 1990. There was what was called the Troon Commission. They brought this British guy from Scotland Yard, to deal with, to do the investigations. And then there was a commission chaired by the late Chief Justice Kisheru. Richard Kwach was in that commission as well. And it was a board, commission actually, and the more so, exactly where that commission was headed, and it is bandaged. And those who are suspected of Oko's murder were arrested, they were never charged, and there were no prosecutions. I think a lot of the millennials who remember the Work Commission, or even the Gen Z, I think. This is 2007, after that election, there was the Work Commission, okay? And when you look at all those commissions, the common denominator, in my view, is that they were used to diffuse popular uprisings, to 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 make sure that the public anger, dissipated, and that will be it. And they use these task forces, like the Huko thing. If those of you remember, Huko was supposed to have shot himself in the leg and doused himself with acid and burned himself. That was basically the theory that the government, advanced. So task forces, commissions of inquiry, whenever there are issues, and Miguna made this point, who appoints them? It's the culprits, the people that we suspect are the criminals between what has happened. Okay, so it's we should uh, reject them. The other thing that is historical in terms of demonstrations and mass action over years is the fact that the criminal elements, people have talked about goons, they've talked about uh, criminals. What we have known all along is that within the police force, there is always a criminal gang. And that gang invariably reports to the president and not to their superiors. And they have been dangerous. Those of you who are of my generation will remember the famous Gorokos. They were supposed to be taking care of the cattle wrestling, yes, in certain areas. They didn't do that. In fact, they spent a lot of time in the 70s trying to intimidate President Moi to resign, and they were involved in what was called the Change the Constitution movement during that period, so that President Moi would not automatically succeed Jomo Kenyatta in the event he died in office. And the others, you must have heard of Kwekwe, the flying squad. And even the current one, I think, is called Rhino. They have, names. And the politicians themselves have militia, okay? You must have heard of Raila's Men in Black, okay? You must have heard, or you might not have, but a lot of people of my generation would know that in 1997, Ngumo had a militia called Jesh la Mzee that terrorized us during the mass action during that period. So when the president talks about criminals and the gangs, he's He's not telling the truth. And I honestly, I don't think if he tells the truth, it must be by accident. And even that one, I wouldn't believe it. So the gangs and the Gen Z have seen this clearly, that these people join the demonstrations and they do stuff, and the police seem to, to protect them. And so the of course they are deployed to completely make people angry against the peaceful demonstrators, because they'll say, oh, these people are destroying property, they are stealing and so forth. And it's wrong for us to accept that dialogue or that argument, because a government that cannot protect property and lives actually is illegitimate. And that's a legal position as well, a political as well as a political one. If you are in government and you cannot support, protect lives and the property of the citizens, then you are illegitimate. And there's a lot of evidence that we have seen where the police, watch as people, commit crimes. So this narrative about gangs and whatnot, okay, if the state was actually protecting the demonstrators from the gangs and making sure that the gangs don't steal or destroy property, then I'll be persuaded. But they are the ones who resurrect them, because those gangs are always, there. I mean, we've all known about Mungiki, for example. All right. So that narrative should not actually, be accepted. But I just wanted to finish by, celebrating the Gen Z for expressing, their anger, the protesting, this uprising or this revolution. And I look at it also as a generation that is also telling the
The
Okay.
Gen Zs right now and the millennials on the street is the opposition.
Thank you. Uh, Dr. CJ Mutunga, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I Let me start by saying that what happened yesterday about Mungiki, for example. All right. So that narrative should not actually be accepted. But I just wanted to finish by celebrating the Gen Z for expressing their anger, the protesting, this uprising or this revolution, and I look at it also as a generation that is also telling the government that they have to respect constitutions, they have to respect the rule of law, that they have to respect the human rights of Kenyans, and they are talking about the material interests of the youth and the Kenyans, and that's politics of issues for me, and I think it's very, very important, and I think it should be continued. Uh, the JNC will have to decide, and I'm sure probably they have already decided, because I know they have political parties and social movements, that particular generation. So basically, we don't need to to advise you. It's your movement. We glorify it for the reasons that I've given. Go ahead and decide on your political and ideological positions. Make sure you continue, making your political demands, and watch out for politics of division through ethnicity. The factions you are dealing with, be very good at organizing politics on the basis of ethnicity and the monetization, and also they know they have the backing of foreign interests. So those are some of the things you have to to watch out. Watch out that narrative. People coming to say, oh well, just work with this faction. The dialogue we are being invited to is a monologue, but to obviously expose you to either manipulation or bribes or whatever. So I think I salute your mass action, and I just wanted to finish. Kachoka asked me to comment on Article 241 of the Constitution, that is the deployment of the military under that particular section, article, and the paragraph. I think that in fact the paragraphs, they use the wrong paragraph, all right, okay, because and even the ones they try to use, we didn't have an emergency or disaster, okay, in the country. Constitutional mass action under 37, Article 37 of the Constitution cannot be called an emergency or a disaster. Nor can it, the other C, that paragraph C that Gashoka was talking about Parliament, giving approval. It also says that the military may be deployed to restore peace in any part of Kenya affected by unrest or instability, but only with the approval of the National Assembly. I don't agree that the mass action that were constitutional and that invoked the Constitution and the rule of law can be described as unrest or even instability. I think this one is like when you have some areas, and I think you have some areas in the Rift Valley where there are such deployments. But what was happening, you know, in the last few weeks was not unrest or instability. It was peaceful. It was young people expressing their anger constitutionally, exercising their freedom of expression, assembly, movement. So, in my opinion, what we are being prepared for is a declaration of state of emergency, which is under 58, Article 58 of the, of the 58 of the Constitution. And that, when you look at that, provision, I think it's 58. Yes, it is. When you look at that, article of the Constitution, you will find, yeah, it's called state of emergency. You find that the person who does it, okay, it's the president, okay, who declares it, that state of emergency, and of course it lasts for 14 days. Then it can be extended by Parliament for 2 months, and also it's subjected to uh, legal action. The Supreme Court may decide on the validity of the declaration of state of emergency, and that means that citizens can, of course, go to Supreme Court and challenge the validity of this state of emergency. But I think that's probably where we are headed, and we should be prepared for it. But even if there is that declaration, as I was said, the conditions are also pretty strict in terms of the timelines, in terms of the the challenge. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much, for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. And yes, just a comment and some few questions before I open now the floor to everyone to just ask questions. Dr. Miguna mentioned not having knowledge, or no, having to be really just not having knowledge beforehand about the armory, and was suggesting that it would be difficult for the average population to know where this is, and so there were comments around, or concerns, that even the parliament, when the demonstrators say they were going to occupy it, that it was indeed understaffed, and of course this is the government should come out and say something about it. But there is an impression that probably the police were not really well prepared, or did not want to. So it was more of, it could be also just a setup. And there's also some news that was going on about the CCTV of the parliament not being found. So these are all information that are really causing anxiety in the population when they think, okay, is there something being hidden? So probably it would be good for people, for the concerned or the people who have the mandate to also really inform the citizens so that citizens do not need to have suspicions. So the question I have for you, so regarding the deployment of the military, as we saw, okay, in your opinion, you say what happened is not exactly an arrest or instability. And we saw that the approval was from the parliament was actually retrieved after, which was not in line with it. And so what can we do about it at this point? Are we going to, are the citizens just going to, wait for it to take the course that it's taking, or is there a way of actually retrieving it back so that we don't have the military deployment, on the side, because that is also causing anxiety in the population? If you can answer to that, then the second question, I see your miking. The second question is yesterday the ruling party and the opposition uh, decided that they're going to form a government of national unity. Does the ruling party legally still have the mandate to do that? Over to you, Dr. Ray, the two questions.
Yeah, I think I tried to explain the article, this article 241, that was used, and you have already said that even the so-called approval they got was what we call retrospective. They didn't go to parliament under that particular paragraph before they did what they did. And I was just arguing that there is no way what was happening could be described as emergency or disaster or unrest or instability. It was a constitutional expression, by the young people, and they they actually, used the supreme law to make those demands. Okay, so they have to be praised for for doing that. Okay, uh, and about the armory that you raised, it's it's a it's not even a matter of our concern. It's blatant lies. Okay, blatant lies that the people who are so peaceful